On October 5th of 2018, a very rare incident occurred when two individuals went missing in Idaho on the same day, and in very close proximity to each other. Whether the two cases are connected in any way is unknown, but the unusual circumstances and similarities surrounding each is what makes both cases compelling. Terrence Woods was the first individual to go missing that day. He was 26 years old, a TV producer working for Raw Productions out of the UK on the popular television show Gold Rush. Terrence and 11 other crew members were filming in the area of the Penman Mine, an abandoned gold and silver mine located in Idaho. The details regarding Terrence's relationship with the rest of the film crew have been widely discussed since his disappearance, as he was new amongst the well-seasoned group and a bit of an odd man out. His parents claim that Terrence was not exactly welcomed amongst the crew and struggled in his new position, whilst the crew themselves say that he was well-liked and given the assistance he needed in order to succeed in his position. Whatever his relationship was with this crew, he was reportedly acting strange during filming on this particular day, seemingly distant and unfocused. Though it wasn't until they were about to wrap up for the day when Terrence apparently dropped his radio on the ground and walked to a nearby cliff edge where he stood briefly before making a mad dash down in what was described as a very steep cliffside. Terrence's crew watched in disbelief before reacting by trying to chase after him, but they had extreme difficulty in navigating the same terrain at the speed that Terrence had somehow managed to do. Needless to say, they lost sight of him as he ran off into the thickly wooded area of Idaho. Still, they tried to find him by searching and calling out to him. Terrence had disappeared with essentially only the clothes on his back. He was reported missing to the police around 5:30 p.m. that day, and shortly thereafter the search for him began. However, around this same time, and 28 miles to the northeast, 76-year-old Connie Johnson disappeared from Fog Mountain. Connie was a former school teacher and retired United States Forest Service ranger. At the time of her disappearance, she was working as a cook at a wilderness camp for hunters on Fog Mountain. This was the same area she had worked for years when she was a ranger. She had been a guide in the area and knew it extremely well. The last time she was seen was October 2nd, the same day the hunters she had been working for left the camp to go on their hunt. October 3rd was the last time anyone heard from Connie, as she had radio contact with the group, but they reportedly could not understand what she was saying. Whether this last bit of contact she had was some attempt to call for help, or just garbled radio contact is unknown. The hunters returned to camp on October 5th, and found that Connie and her dog Ace were gone, no trace of them having been found. She was reported missing to authorities around 9:30 p.m. that evening, 4 hours after Terrence Woods had been. Authorities from many different agencies spent the following week searching for Terrence and Connie, using people on the ground, aircraft, and dog teams, and as is common in these cases, search efforts were hindered by poor weather. Dogs tracking Terrence's scent followed it down the hill, but stopped when they reached the road. Nothing was ever found of either of them. On October 23rd, however, Connie's dog, Ace, showed up at the Moose Creek Ranger Station, the same ranger station that Connie worked as a ranger, and located about 14 miles away from the hunting camp where both had gone missing. The dog was found to be in good condition and, quote, not hungry or struggling in any way. Search and Rescue attempted to take Ace back into the search area in hopes that he would alert on Connie's scent. But the dog did not want to go back into the mountains, and Connie was never found. Connie's former colleagues were in disbelief that this had happened to her, saying, quote, "This is a woman who literally spent the last 25 years of her life on foot, in the wilderness alone, doing her wilderness ranger work." End quote. And this is a very important point. Connie had spent many years of her life working as a ranger, but also working as a ranger in the very same area she disappeared. She was working safely in a camp at the time, so something must have happened that compelled her to leave. But she knew this area well enough to be a guide, so something also must have happened to her that she was never found and never walked out on her own volition. The situation was much the same with Terrence Woods. Both of these individuals were in places that should have been relatively safe. Terrence was with his film crew, and something compelled him to run down a cliff face and into the forest with no supplies. Terrence's parents say that their son had no history of mental instability, so this is very strange behavior. And while these two cases were reported on the same day, it would appear they more likely happened consecutively, as Connie must have disappeared sometime between October 3rd and October 5th. Perhaps the 3rd, as that was the last time that she had radio contact with the hunting group. Then, about 30 miles and a day later, Terrence goes missing. The similarity and proximity of these two cases is striking. Terrence Woods' family has been particularly vocal about their son's disappearance, unable to accept the version of events detailed by the film crew that was with him. Terrence's father said in an interview that he couldn't believe his son could, quote, "run down the cliff without tripping, falling, or hurting himself. You don't have a trace of his blood or a piece of his clothing, and he ran like a hare so fast nobody could catch him." End quote. The sheriff acknowledged that Terrence's run down the cliffside was a difficult feat given the steep terrain, but also pointed out that the crew members were able to follow Terrence without harming themselves, though presumably at a slower pace. It is reasonable to understand why Terrence's family is having a hard time believing the story being presented to them. However, in the grand scheme of strange disappearances, Terrence's disappearance fits a lot of the same profile points as many others. The strange behavior the crew noticed throughout the day, and the very out-of-character act of suddenly running down the cliff, and the weather-hindering search efforts, as well as nothing ever being found of him. These are all common characteristics in other cases, but it is doubtful that Terrence's family are aware or interested in any disappearances other than the one involving their own son, which is understandable. They seem to believe there was some sort of foul play involving the film crew that was with him. But given that Terrence was with 11 other people, if his crew had conspired to do something to him, it would be very hard to make sure all of them stayed quiet about it. If the film crew were indeed trying to cover up some sort of foul play, making up a story about a man simply running down a mountainside into the woods for no apparent reason should presumably fall pretty low on the list of fabricated alibis. In light of the bizarre and unexplainable details of Terrence's case, it makes sense that the family would want a more normal and human explanation of what happened to their son. The pain of not knowing what happened to someone is oftentimes the worst part, and having only the knowledge that your son ran into the woods never to be seen again must be unbearable. Hopefully, one day Terrence Woods and Connie Johnson will be found, if nothing else, so that at least their families can have some sense of closure. Until next time, thanks for watching.